Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my last Hobby Hoppers Magic Maker project for the year. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Steph Williams. I'm a paper crafter and card maker from Queensland, Australia, and I am lucky enough to work on the creative team for the small Aussie business Hobby Hoppers. Today's Magic Maker project is this super sweet and very punny Christmas card featuring some old and new lawn fawn sets. To get started, I'm going to show you what I used. So I'm using some of the pink paper from this Nitpicky set, the Bar Humbug stamp set, the Rooting for You stamp set, and the adorable Henry's ABCs. I was also going to use this gift tag, but I then swapped it for one of the simple banners. You'll see that a bit later. My pink pattern paper is going to be cut with my diagonal stripes background die, and I'm going to be saving every second one and using the others for another project later. Lucky for us, Valentine's Day is just around the corner, so I'm sure I'll put them to good use very soon. For every other stripe, I wanted to create a colour that I would be using for the beets as well. So I've got a mix of Distress Oxide inks here. I've got some candied apple, picked raspberry, and seedless preserves. I've just kind of given them a bit of a mix on my mat, and I'm just dabbing my cardstock into that. I was kind of going for a bit of a watercolory feel with this, as it's the same technique I'll be using to stamp my vegetables very soon. Once that cardstock is dry, I then run it through the same die and make sure I grab the opposite diagonal stripes. And here's a little something I thought I would share with you. So every time I have a card idea in my head, I scribble it down on a tiny piece of scrap cardstock, and this one is for this card. So I originally had it as a portrait style card, so that is why my Nitpicky paper is probably not the direction I would want it to be in for a landscape card. I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things, but had I thought this through a little earlier, I would have cut my paper the other way. You'll see what I mean as we go along. So here I am just taking my time, adding all of these strips of paper in the correct order to make this background. And once that's done, I'm then just going to add some of my watercolor pigment flecks over the top. And for this card, I'm using very pale, very sparkly pink, and just a little bit of the picked raspberries as well, just to tie my background in together. I played around with this stamp set just a little bit. So the beetroots in this stamp set are meant to be the really itty bitty ones. I think what I actually used was maybe not the turnips. I'm not sure what it was. The turnips, radishes, I'm not sure, but the bigger version of the similar shape is what I went with. And what I did was mix those same Distress Oxide inks all over my mat, watered them down nicely, and then I used that for my stamp. It kind of gave each of the vegetables a different look. They look a little bit like watercolor. I love the way that they dried and that it wasn't one solid, even color. I thought that just added a little bit of extra detail to this card. It's very easy to do and lots of fun to play around with. I did use the correct leaves for the beetroots. I don't think that really matters, but I stamped it on just one of these little cuties. I love this stamp set so much, and I hadn't used it for a really long time, and I thought I really want to make it work in a Christmas card. I feel like it's one of those stamp sets that isn't overly versatile. I don't automatically think, oh, I'll use my vegetable set. I think about that with every mouse set, but not so much these guys, so I was really excited to get them to work for a Christmas card. Here I am just stamping out a few accessories from that Bar Humbug stamp set, and that is one of my favourites for Christmas cards. It just seems to have the best little accessories. It's got the lights, the Santa hat, the ribbon, and the scarf, and I feel like you can use them in most of your Christmas cards. So if you don't have this particular set, even if you don't plan on using the sheep all the time, I don't use them very often, but I do find at Christmas time I'm constantly coming back for these images. Now that we've moved on to colouring, I'm keeping things incredibly simple for this card. I'm just using a little bit of green and red. I figured green goes well in this card because I've used it for the little sprouts on my little vegetable, and red wasn't too far off the pink, so I just didn't want to add too many colours in. I feel like it was just enough. I feel like this sentiment today was just a bit of a lucky coincidence that I was using older Lawn Fawn stamp sets. So the Rooting for You and the Bar Humbug, they have the same font, which I haven't seen for quite a while in Lawn Fawn sets. But the good thing about this was that I could mix and match my sentiment. So I've stamped out enough for it to say have N and Christmas, and what I'm going to do is spell out the word upbeat with my ABC dies. I love that these are the same font, it just makes my sentiment look very well put together. And here I am doing some white embossing on some black cardstock. And hopefully you'll be able to see which of the Lawn Fawn banners I used for these sentiments. Though I didn't keep the little flag shape at the end, I did trim them off. Now I've seen this technique used a lot lately. I'm not sure if they stick it down to a mat like I do here, but I found this to be very helpful. But I have seen a lot of people using vellum as a rather large piece of their background. It kind of mutes the pattern paper and gives you a nice little platform to pop a sentiment on. So what I'm doing here is I've just used a bit of washi tape and I've stuck it down to my grid mat so that I can line things up neatly, because I cannot be trusted to do it by eye. Everything would be wonky. So what I'm doing here is using those guidelines to add my word upbeat, and I'm also going to be using those lines to add the rest of my sentiment. The reason why this card couldn't be a portrait card and had to be a landscape was because my word upbeat was too big. It didn't fit on the vellum and it didn't fit on pretty much the entire card when I tipped it on its side. So that's why my pattern paper didn't quite work out exactly as I wanted it to. Once I'm happy with the placement of everything here, I'm going to add some white highlights to my letters so that they match everything else. And now we're moving on to prep for the rest of the scene. So what I'm doing here is just adding all these little accessories to my vegetables. I really wanted to include the scarf, but no matter which way I put it on the radishes, it just looked silly. So this was the best I ended up doing in the end. I'm using some of my double-sided roller tape on the back of my sentiment on the vellum. It's really tricky to decide where to put it on the vellum without it showing through at the top. So what I've done here is just added it on the most solid pieces so that you won't see it. And then my vegetables are going to have some double-sided foam squares on the back. And I'm going to strategically place them so that the foam squares aren't just holding up my vegetables, but they're also going to stick the corners of the vellum down. And while I'm setting this adorable scene, I thought now is the perfect time to talk about Hobby Hoppers. So if you don't know what Hobby Hoppers is, it is an online craft store. It is my favourite Aussie shop to work with and to buy from, and you better believe I will be waiting on the website for the new Lawn Fawn release, which will be happening in just a few days, and it's a Valentine's Day release. I am so excited with what I've seen already. I can't wait to grab my things from Hobby Hoppers. Trish always gets my orders out so quickly and so perfectly packaged. I know that I will be playing around with my new stamps and dies in no time. I would love for you to comment below what you're excited about for the new release, and I hope that you'll check out Hobby Hoppers when the release goes live. I'll be sure to include all the links to all the products that I use for today's project in the description below, so make sure you check out Hobby Hoppers and everything that Trish stocks. And there we have it. This sweet little upbeat card is complete. I hope you love it. I hope you've loved all the projects that I've made for Hobby Hoppers this year. I'll be sure to include some photos of some of the other things I've completed as a magic maker for 2022. I hope you'll be joining us next year. I'm already excited for everything the new year can bring. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye for now.